For any of our buddies just joining in, oh wow, there's a lot of people joining. Comment about where y'all are tuning in from and what y'all are building these days. Feel free to introduce yourself and plug any links you want to connect with each other. Looks like it's having some difficulties live stream to YouTube, so I'm just going to record this on the cloud. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in to our event today, Building a Company in AI Defining Problem to Product Market Fit. I'm here with Noah and Michael. I actually met Michael in person at our Design and AI event in San Francisco a couple of months ago. And since then, they've been building an AI startup called ImageWorks. So we're really excited to have them on today. And yeah, well, I'd like to start with introductions. So feel free to introduce yourselves. What are you doing now? What is your background?
Yeah, I'm Noah.
I'm Michael.
And we met a little over 8 years ago at Berkeley, where we both studied computer science. And since then, we went on to a few different companies, and we can talk a bit about that. But earlier this year, we decided to go full-time on ImageWorks, which was sort of an organic process where we were talking with a bunch of designers, really embracing the mom test, which we'd love to share about too. And that really got us to the idea that we ended up building. And now we're pretty much done with our MVP. And Michael, if you want to talk about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Michael, computer science, Berkeley, software engineer at Groupon, and then a couple of med tech startups that were mainly around applying machine learning models to medical problems. Got really good at building a lot of the platforms around these machine learning models. And so when a lot of the generative AI stuff came out, decided to hop in with Noah. A lot of the conversations we were having were just really exciting, really cool, and a lot of clear product fit for some of the issues that we're experiencing. And so, yeah, we're really excited to be talking about, kind of our journey, a lot of the things we learned. We're still fairly early stage, but we've seen some really exciting things going on. So really happy to be able to share with the Design Buddies community.
Yeah, thanks for coming. What was the story behind ImageWorks? And what is ImageWorks for those who don't know?
Yeah, ImageWorks is a platform to help you ideate better. It's like whenever you have an idea or a problem that you want to go after or design, our whole ethos is everything needs to be redesigned. And we are helping curate instantly in service of whatever your customer or client goals are. And so imagine being able to leverage all of the material at your design studio, tapping into the intelligence of what that aesthetic looks like and how it might fit into customer problems. We can leverage that material to create new things or curate things that exist in the world in real time. And then think of it as like an AI mood board. And once you have that mood board of material, imagine incorporating real-time feedback from customers or clients and then getting like a new set of material to iterate on.
Yeah, and we take a lot of the generative AI tools and bring in a lot of real world data to grasp a lot of these key design concepts, bring them up earlier in the process, and then connect a lot of these to real world objects. Because if you're generating an image in, say, Midjourney or equivalent, that's not a real object. But if you can connect it to real world data about what material is it made of, is it structurally sound, how is it going to perform in the market? These are things that can take a lot of these generative AI tools and make them a lot more useful for business and commercial purposes.
Imagine rendering a table in the style of your design agency, and then clicking on that table and then seeing something similar to it that you can actually buy in the real world. That's just one of the problems that we're solving. But the way that we got here was by seeing that a lot of the tools that exist in the marketplace are for the execution of design, of like, I know what I want to make. Let me go use Autodesk, or let me go use Figma, or let me go use this tool to actually put it together. But before you know what the design's going to look like, there's this whole visual research process where a lot of it is very manual, like copy and pasting images and canvases, dragging them around, searching various different boards on Pinterest or other communities.
Post-it notes on a cork board is a very common one we've seen.
I mean, just some of the horror stories of designers that we talked to where they would open up a Keynote or PowerPoint file that's like 600 slides long. And like that's part of the design research process where we were like, we could make a better tool for this.
We had one woman who printed out so much paper in the office that she got fined by the fire marshal a couple $100. So you can really start to see where a lot of these stories add up, where, we really recognize, hey, we think there's a real market opportunity here.
Nice. Yeah, for anyone tuning in, I see a lot of people just joined. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Otherwise, I will keep taking questions that y'all submitted. I'm curious though, like, how did you find, I know both of your backgrounds are mainly in engineering. How did you just, what inspired you to go for more like of a designer use case?
Yeah. So over the last 4.5 years, I was working at Apple. I started with machine learning on the App Store, worked with a few designers there as we iterated on different product placements within the app. And then I ended up transitioning to a privacy role across all of Apple's AI and machine learning, where I also interfaced with even more designers because we would design, the privacy team would be involved with designing a product as early on as possible. So that privacy was baked into it and literally designed into the product. And it was working with those designers and the combination of new generative AI technologies coming onto the market that were becoming much more commoditized and successful, commoditized and available, where I to see how they were using it in their workflow. And here I was thinking like, oh, like we should just go make like a generative AI company. But it was actually by talking to all of these designers across many different disciplines that we realized there was this tangential problem that everyone faced as a part of their design research that was very cumbersome and time consuming, and that generative AI would actually add to this problem, where we're exiting a world of scarcity in design and entering a world of abundance where you can just so easily create so much more material than you used to. And in that world of abundance, there's a harder challenge of managing all that material. And so this problem's always been there of managing your design assets and bringing them to the forefront, depending on what your clients are doing or what they want to do. But it's just going to get even harder in a world where now you have like 1,000 images that you have to sift through.
Yeah, and to your point, this problem has been an issue for quite a while. It's just becoming a lot more design firms are facing it. In fact, we've heard various names for it. The wedding photographer problem is one, where wedding photographer will take 1,000 photos. They'll be taking photos the entire day, and then they have to slim it down to 3 or 4 that embody a wedding. How do you embody a wedding with 4 photos? We heard it in a lot of movie cases where a movie will essentially overshoot the amount of video they have and then can't find the pieces they need to actually cut together for the final cut. So this issue has been around. It's just that now every design studio is facing it.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that more and more with so much generative AI, so many variations you can generate, so much time to sift through. Like, I can definitely relate. When I go on trips, take a bunch of photos, it takes me so long. That's why my feed, like Instagram feed, is like so out of date because I take so many. And yeah, anyways, tangent here. I'm curious though, like when thinking of like taking in all the data about like how people can have so much like different a lot of like photography, different variations. How do you guys like kind of like summarize that into a problem statement? And I could imagine when you're like pitching to like investors or starting a company, pitching to people, like you would have to have some kind of like quantitative. I'm curious, like how do you took that data to really summarize that as a problem space to communicate to your user?
Yeah. So one thing that we sort of learned as we talked to a lot of investors was if we go into these meetings and we just sort of pitch this cool idea of like, oh, we have this generative AI tech and here's how we think it can be useful, that doesn't really communicate the problem. And so the problem in this space to us is the workflow. And cool generative AI technologies is just a small solution in a sliver of the workflow. And it might create some tangential problems, but really the problem we're solving is this ideation and research problem. And so communicating how much time design agencies spend in that process per client, depending on the type of designer, is really valuable because we can go into a room and say, hey, look at this interior designer. She works with 4 high-end clients a year. And here's how much time she spends just curating material for each client. If she could spend a fraction of that time, she can take on 2 new customers. That's a huge amount of added revenue just for her firm. And it would just be a no-brainer to adopt a product like that into your workflow, where you don't even have to sell them on the idea, because they just see there's the value creation. They're like, wow, I can't live without this kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is how we get to a market cap where a VC might be more interested as an actual backable business, is because, every business has, especially a startup that's, experimenting and trying new things, is they need to make bets. And one of those bets that is kind of a pillar of what we're thinking is that a lot of this early design process, when you're still trying to figure out what you want, has a strong amount of convergence to it. And then once you actually have to go out into the real world and build it, then it starts to diverge greatly. And so if we can hit in that very early stages where a lot of the design, regardless of the actual image material is, we think that can be a really successful business.
Right. And just to hit that on the nail, the constraints of an architect when they're actually making the building, like making the design, are going to be completely different than a graphic designer who's just like, hey, I don't care if this is levitating in the air. But if they're part of the ideation process, both of those designers are just exploring concepts and layouts and moods. And so early on in the process, there's actually a larger market where this is a problem, rather than focusing in on just this one specific type of designer's rendering tool.
And now that I think about it, that is actually why a lot of the modern artificial intelligence is so powerful, is that a company like ours doesn't have to build out an expert system or deploy, discrete, models for each one of these cases, or each one of these very niche cases. We can apply a larger, more general generative network and then just fine tune it to particular use cases, which is a much easier workflow on our end to build out these custom models that deliver on each one of these use cases discreetly.
And that's actually the why now bet. I mean, generally, when you go to an investor, you have to tell them like, okay, here's the problem, here's the solution, but why now? And why you? And the why now is this type of business, due to exactly what Michael just said, would not have been possible to build this quickly several years ago, or even a year ago.
Cost effective, right? It would have been way too expensive to roll all this out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like communicating that time save as like a value to like really quantify and validate something. I'm curious, I want to dive more into like the convergence and divergence and how you decide to like pinpoint that. So can you walk through the example of how you went through like the conversion and like divergent thinking for ImageWorks?
Yeah, so this is where I sort of touched on it a little earlier, of the mom test, where if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. It's a very quick read. You can do it in a couple hours. And it's really just about talking to customers or people with problems in their workflow. I mean, that's just one example of it. But, instead of talking to a bunch of different designers, in this case, because they're the users of the product, and asking them specific questions that would maybe bias them towards our product, or even telling them about what we're doing, we would just go into these meetings and we would say like, hey, like, walk us through your workflow. What does it look like? Just like show us how you do your job and like how you do things for your client. And just very open-ended, they would share with us their process. And if we just nudge them on a few things, they would just naturally say like, oh, I wish there was a way that does X, or a solution for Y. And they would naturally arrive at like, this is a bad process. And so just letting people open-end share it, we sort of started to tease apart what the process looks like for each designer. And so we started taking all these meeting notes of like, okay, we talked to an architect, we talked to a UI UX designer, we talked to an interior designer, a graphic designer,
fashion design, industrial design, really every, particular.
And based on looking at their workflow, that visual research, that ideation was pretty consistent across the board. But then once they, put pen to paper and needed to make a sketch or order materials, it started to diverge, where you have different engineering constraints for an architect versus an industrial designer.
Yeah, and not only was it that early stage research very similar, but also everyone had come up with their own fun thumbtack and super glue solution, which is another great example of these are people who are actively trying to solve this and can't find anything. Right. They have tried to find their favorite flavor of software tool to try and fix it. And it kind of does, and it kind of doesn't, and they complain a lot. So that's generally, again, a good signal that there's some kind of opportunity there.
And it makes sense because a lot of the solutions that these designers are adopting for their use case weren't made for their use case. It's just that the product wasn't there. And so they're just kind of making it work. So they're like, okay, like I'll use these Pinterest boards, or I'll use this Miro board and then I'll have to take it over and manually paste it into some PDF. And then I get feedback and then I repeat this whole process again. And it's just, that could be better, the tool isn't there.
Mhm. Yeah, I like how you just observe different disciplines of design and their workflow, not narrowing to one specific type of designer. Because I feel like this is also really useful skills. I can imagine a lot of designers in our audience today. As feel like for me as a UX designer, it's also valuable to do user research as like a conductor and observer as well, and not limiting any specific demographic, but just see in general how people think of the problem space and what products you're solving. I feel like building a startup, it's kind of like UXing it, improving the experience of people. And there's a lot of like crossovers. I know there's a lot of designers on our audience. I know we have a lot of people who recently joined. I'm curious, like, what are your backgrounds in the chat? Like, are you designer, founder, VC, engineer, product? Just chime in the chat. Student learning something. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to share them. Otherwise, I got a long list of questions I will run through. Sales biz dev, cool. I'm also curious, like I know with ImageWorks, I'm curious. I remember the first time I've learned about ImageWorks, you guys were more focused on interior design. And right before we started our call, you guys were talking with a lot of B2B sales. So I'm very curious how that like pivot went.
Yeah.
What kind of pivots do you guys have?
Yeah, the business model for ImageWorks is really going after design agencies and studios and sort of selling into a collective of designers. There's some use cases where a freelance individual might want to, and actually this is a good example in the graphic design space. Some 90% of the market are freelance designers, and there are still a lot of interior designers that are sort of, one or two people that just go out and work with a small set of clients, and they pump out some really amazing projects. And it's just a small little mom and pop shop. But really the approach we're doing is to go after each business and studio and sell ImageWorks as a platform into them. So what we realized is beyond the problem with interior designers, this just helps manage your assets in a collaborative way. So it's like, this is a better tool to store all your images. And two, once you put things together, you can iterate in real time with the clients that you're working with. And that makes sense beyond just interior design. And but to answer your question, when we talked to these interior designers, they were like, you should talk to this architect. And we would go talk to the architect. They're like, you should talk to this interior designer. And we were like, there's this overlap effect. Why are we limiting ourselves to just one particular set of designers when it's a workflow that's sort of consistent across a bunch of different disciplines?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I like that. And I'm curious, like, how did you guys decide to make the decision between like B2B or B2C? Because I know a lot of founders, I see a lot of founders in the chat have that back and forth, including myself. So yeah, curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely don't want to hold the product back from freelance individuals and in a way that's like a consumer sense, but we really think we're solving a workflow of designers in a professional setting. And that's really the workflow that we wanted to solve first before branching out into maybe more interesting tools for consumer products, simply because that's a very clear problem that has like a value add, like a monetary value add. Because if you can save someone time in a professional setting, it very clearly translates to save dollars. Or if you help them close a deal or finish a project and take them to some finish line, they're going to go, of course, I'm going to pay for the software because it enables me to do this 2 times faster or 3 times faster.
Yeah. And as Noah says, it makes our customer story way easier, where we can really niche down into exactly what our ideal customer profile is going to look like, and really just try to go after those kind of individuals when we're doing, cold email, cold calls, when we're, fretting people out to figure out if it's going to be a good partnership for both of us. And so really having the business model be congruent with what that niche looks like and what that ideal customer story looks like is what we think will be, best for the business overall. And we've looked at a couple of different business models. Box is one that's come up a lot. A lot of the freemium services have come up a lot. You can go subscription, or you can go for usage cap, or you can go for credit systems. There's so many different ways to approach business models, and in the AI space, it's still being figured out between ChatGPT, a lot of the platform as a service providers, still all trying to like see what business model works in these kind of environments. But at the end of the day, if you're from core business principles, it's good to have your business model aligned with what your ideal customer is going to look like. And we think that's why B2B sales is best for us.
Right. You can always open it up to a freemium model in the future. And I mean, we even have that where if you sign up for the product, we're currently in the beta phase, which, by the way, everyone should sign up for the wait list. If you're on the call. And you know, when you sign up, you get like a set number of image generation credits out off the gate. But ideally, that's something that we just sell to a studio so that the designers working on their projects don't have to worry about usage caps or anything like that. It's all just a part of their workflow. Which is actually a deviation from the current tools where they sell them by the bundles of credits.
Oh yeah, I've subscribed to some AI tools and I have limited words I can generate.
Right. Exactly.
Limited credits. Yeah, I try a lot of tools. Awesome. Oh, hi everyone. I see a lot of designers, founders. I'm also a founder and UX designer. Great to meet you all. Software engineers, UX engineers. Nice, nice. +1 to the mom test. Nice, nice. Cool. I'm curious, so just kind of diving into the business model. I feel like for me as a UX designer, it's important, and as a founder, anyone, it's important to being able to like monetize and make money so you can keep making impact. How did you guys go about your business model, and how would you describe your business model, an ideal customer right now? I know it's always changing, but how are you guys thinking about it like right now?
Yeah, the ideal customer is a small to medium-sized design agency or studio. Even in some cases, an educational institution that has a whole design school, where like you could think of a student as sort of a participant in a studio for at least a time box period of time. But really, our ideal customer is, someone like IDEO or a firm that
architecture firm,
an
5 to 10
firm.
people, usually a fast follow-on business, or someone who's looking for growth opportunities in a difficult environment, and is usually technically aware but doesn't necessarily have the capabilities to build out their own kind of systems.
A fashion design firm is a really great example of this, where they work in these quick 3-month seasonal cycles of like, we got to pump out a fall catalog and a winter catalog, and they need like 50 assets per catalog, and it needs to look different, but also in the style of their firm, and they need to integrate like design trends. And that's like the perfect use case where a platform to help them manage that whole process and iterate with their team would be a lot better than a fire hazard that they get fined for in the studio. Although, printed material still has its place for sure. So that I would say is our ideal customer.
That makes sense. I'm curious if, I don't know, just design. What if Design Buddies has like fall trend? I don't know, just spitballing ideas out there.
Design Buddies is a studio on the platform with a bunch of studio members.
Yes. One day, maybe.
That's possible.
Yeah.
We have a lot of designers looking for jobs, and a lot of the people looking to hire designers approaching me every day. So we're just trying to figure out ways we can make it work and just provide value on both designers and helping them make money, and also helping clients find designers. So anyways, that's down the line. So
one thing we actually thought about if we ever opened it up to a consumer play was, you could probably use the product as a portfolio builder. If all of your assets were on it, you could just tell it the type of portfolio you wanted to create, in the same way that you might curate material for a particular client or customer. I mean, if there's interest for that, it's possible to build in the future.
Yeah, and it all kind of goes back to one of our core theses: is it's content at the point of pain. That there really is these kind of key moments where designers really need particular pieces of content for these particular use cases. That's currently just incredibly difficult to synthesize and bring together. And so if we can find more examples of, individual designers that have these kinds of problems, then it might make a lot more sense to move in that direction. But for right now, when we're still pretty early stage, we want to have a close relationship with a lot of the businesses that we work with. It's not just about the product, it's about them having a pair of people who really specialize in improving their workflow, bringing on more customers, and creating the images that they need to land this kind of business. And so being a partner with them and partner in that is another reason why focusing on B2B sales right now makes a lot of sense.
Right. That way we can have someone take on our product, and then they could even give us really good product recommendations of how we can fine tune it to fit their use case before we really scale it up to a bunch of other studios.
Yeah, it's actually kind of something similar I did recently. I actually recently launched a course. I put a pretty hefty price, I put a like large price tag to it because I wanted to keep it small and really test it out with like a couple of students before I release it to the wild as well. So, and it's similar with like launching products as well. Like start small, like alpha beta testers before launching it to the wild world. Got a question from Dan asks, I've heard that finding reliable recurring revenue for small and medium-sized businesses is very different from enterprise companies. Do you have any thoughts to make that work?
Yeah, you really bring up a great point. Ticket size matters in this case, where if you're not able to charge enough to make getting the sale worthwhile, it's just not worthwhile going after that business. And most SaaS fall into one of two categories, where either the ticket size is small and you're going after SMB, or the ticket size is big and you're taking a long time to land these large enterprise deals. And so, and this is kind of something I experienced firsthand in my time at Groupon was, we were landing these small SMB businesses, but it was taking 6 to 8 months to get them on the platform and land the sale. And that's just not a sustainable way to, even that was a Fortune 500 business at the time. So, it's definitely not a sustainable business model. That's why for, a lot, for us as a small business, it's a lot of, founder-led sales. It's a lot of very personal relationships of setting up a couple, it makes sense in the early stages when our costs are relatively low. We can approach SMB businesses and say, hey, we can help you in this particular niche. We'll work with you actively to make sure you this product is valuable and get it hooked in. So that way you want to actively use it and it helps us build the product iteratively. So there's a bit more in this early stage of this kind of like coming together. But then once you hit that point, you need to start, really actively going after big tickets and having a fast process to when you are ready to close that sale.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like it. Start small and continue to fine tune everything, and everything is iterative.
It's not easy though. I mean, it's one of the hardest parts of business for sure.
Oh yeah, I learned so many big lessons on this through like myself and design buddies as well. So I can see some parallels with that. Cool. So I'm gonna just try to jump around to make sure we cover all of our topics. So I know we have a lot of founders. I'm curious, like also kind of on the topic of like AI. I know a lot of designers want to get involved in AI, and I know like building I guess like when it comes to building an AI company, it must require like a deep understanding of the technology. Like how do you strike the balance between technical expertise and domain knowledge when forming your team?
Gosh, and the industry's moving so fast too.
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes back to just core engineering principles of being able to quickly swap out as, this kind of technology emerges and changes. A lot of that can be a cost to the business of having to try out new things or having to deploy and retrain a model. But you don't act again. The one of the reasons this technology is groundbreaking is because of availability. Between the OpenAI endpoints, the Palm, AWS's stuff, even a lot of the DevOps work that's gone in throughout the years. I was working in a firm called DeepScribe that was doing automated medical scribe work, and they were doing all their stuff on SageMaker, and SageMaker was Kingmaker in a sense of it made at that time deploying models so much easier that they could come out with some kind of AI first product. And now we're in a stage where it can just be a complete API call. It's like it's any other function. But if you're going to do more custom work, it's going to be more work. But I think really the engineering tools behind a lot of this AI technology have gotten so much better and so much more accessible that you don't need to know a lot of the bleeding edge. You can just work with one of these providers and be, I don't want to call it a wrapper, because you are bringing it to a particular niche and making it useful in a particular use case. And that is valuable. And you don't need to have that engineering expertise. If you want to go above and beyond, which is something we're looking at with a lot of the work out of Google and Berkeley right now, with being able to edit images by pure text and things of that nature, you're going to need more expertise in actually creating these models, getting them into a production setting and deploying them against some kind of custom hosted API.
But with team building, there are really two different ways you could take an AI company. This is a generalization. There are obviously a lot more than this, but overall, you're either going to be an infrastructure company in the AI space or solving some concrete vertical that is like a problem that exists, sort of an end-to-end solution, if you will, in a particular vertical. And so if you're the infrastructure play, you might need to go after those custom engineers that can put together like the latest research. But if you're building something around a vertical, like a problem that exists in the world, the tools are so commoditized and accessible now in a way that they weren't before, that you don't need to hire a machine learning engineer. You just need to have someone with an understanding and if anything, a desire to learn very fast and a lot of fun things, but you don't need like the depth of multiple matrices and linear algebra and how to derive the equations that go into Gaussian curves. Like you don't need that. You just need the ability to put together an app. And like if you have the technical prowess to understand how Figma can translate into an app, that exact kind of thinking it can apply to integrating these APIs into whatever app.
Yeah, and the last point on this is that sometimes it's even better to do that, to focus on one particular vertical and then just work with a particular vendor as your platform, because that vendor is now deeply invested in you being successful as a business. You've now aligned if you're working with AWS, and I've been fortunate enough to work with a couple firms that have actual representatives within AWS to talk to them. That means AWS is going to push you to every single one of their other companies they work with. And that can create a really great flywheel in terms of generating sales, where if you generate compute for AWS will go out and find you customers. And so it can really be great from a partnerships perspective to focus only on that vertical and then, push the rest of the actual technical backing to one of these big platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I'm curious, like I know a lot of people, like I see a lot of like UX designers, engineers in the chat. I'm curious, like how, if they were curious about working at an AI startup, how would you recommend like kind of approaching that, whether that's like learning new technologies, being very open to learning, but like doing some AI projects? Like I kind of get to like, how do we, I guess like as a UX or in UX and software, how would you recommend people like getting started in AI or interested in working in the AI space? Like what could they do to stand out and also be successful in the field?
There are a lot of interesting UI UX problems that are coming about as a result of these AI tools that didn't exist before. And I think tackling those, like building or like maybe designing a use case with AI could be one way to highlight sort of being plugged into that industry. But also there are these new problems like how think about just ChatGPT. Like if you're talking to ChatGPT, like what ways could that experience be better with UI or UX? Or if you were to have like a GPT builder go out and try to do something for you, what would that interface be? Whereas like a lot of UI UX in the last 10 years has been a lot of wireframing. Now there's this interesting problem set where like, okay, like forget about the app wireframe. How do you actually communicate with an agent that can talk back to you in a way that can be more than just one chat? Like how can you integrate different inputs from different questions that you might have all congruently at the same time?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
One concrete example we've had of a key design issue is that when users are trying to curate this material, the AI agent will pull the material that is not directly linked to the actual query. So like when one of our key theses is that if you're looking for, if your goal, this underlying objective of the customer is to create an interior and they're asking about a chair, they're probably going to want to find complementary tables. They're going to want to find complementary, cushions for the chair, things like that. But if an AI returns those search results, they're not necessarily the thing that was searched for. So how do you almost defend what the AI agents are doing as they're trying to deliver at this underlying customer need? And so it's really a lot of, and this is kind of a principle that we've learned by talking to IDEO a lot, is that you're designing for these sort of, I don't know if you call it extremes, but someone who's very skeptical, someone who's very, looking to not like this or these kinds of situations. And how do you bring them into the fold through a design lens is something that could definitely be great.
Right. Like a problem that we had when we were sharing the product, when it was early on, before when we had a lot of bugs in it still. People are used to searching for things, but we're trying to build a product that curates sort of a collection of material around a goal or an intent that you're trying to design around. And so if we don't design that properly, if you just search for chair, you're gonna be like, why did I get a table? This website sucks. But it's like, no, if we actually communicate to the person, like, why did an AI think that that table was relevant to the chair you searched for? That's a very interesting design problem where there is some intelligence there that we could leverage. But if you just returned it as a regular search would, people would be like, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah.
But if they are like, oh, here's the chair I wanted, and here's other stuff that you might want to consider to blend in, that could be interesting.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Just finding design problems in AI and trying to go about solving. That's actually how I got 3 years ago, like my first job in design. I didn't have any experience, but I found some problems. Well, I had some experience, but like I took Discord and I interviewed some users to find some pain points and design a solution for that. So definitely do that for ChatGPT as well. Yeah, see a question from Maria. How do you manage with the accuracy of the results? I think there's a pain point when working with AI.
So vector search has actually been quite good for us. I think a lot of it has to do with who your embeddings provider is to get accurate results. For the actual just pure ChatGPT-esque, it is certainly difficult to get highly accurate results. You can even just splashing in a little bit of this kind of design thinking of trying to like just prompt the agent to come up with different ideas that it can then go search and pull in is usually enough. It's an interesting problem where, because we're trying to hit this underlying need, we can almost get away with being a little more inaccurate because we are trying to stretch the design idea in different directions than what is expected. So we can actually get away with being a little more inaccurate in exchange for being more interesting, if that makes sense. So when building a product in the AI space, that isn't, I mean, ChatGPT has to be accurate. I mean, obviously it's going to hallucinate or it may just be factually incorrect, which we've experienced before. I think you've experienced before. But for building products in these kind of niches, I think you want to look for problems that are a bit more vague and opaque that allow the agent to be more creative, which is kind of weird and counterintuitive, but is really true at the stage that we're currently in. The other alternative is to go for more of a RAG style approach where whatever the agent says has to be defended with something that it actually has. Like if you're building something that summarizes PDFs or something that a question answering in PDFs, it has to pull the passage and show the passage and say, this is why I've come up with this answer. So I think that's the two best ways from an actual product perspective we've seen that have been very successful.
That makes sense. Cool. Go ahead.
I just said good question.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, good question. Yeah. Didn't think
and
of
for
that.
those who don't know, the embeddings in an image, that's another API that you can use, where in the past you would have to have, taken an image and converted it to outlines and sort of understood what like high dimensional data exists in that image so that you could do a search for, like let's say you have an image of a couch. You can represent that with a bunch of linear algebra. And then when you search couch, you can convert that into numbers then that match the image. But now you can just use an API on like a Google Cloud platform or any other cloud provider, whether it's AWS or some similar one. And you can just convert an image into some vector of numbers, and that's the embedding. And you can do the same thing with words, and you can just perform the search. And so like even that is something that has been augmented away from the builder, where like you don't even have to deal with that anymore if you don't want to. And so you can then go focus on the more interesting problems.
I love that. Work smart, not hard. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use resources you already have. And this is bringing back to my computer science days. Linear algebra. I haven't heard that term in a while.
Yeah. Sorry, I said the words.
No, all good. I haven't touched linear algebra since class in college.
And you don't have to, is what I'm saying. That's
exactly.
This day and age.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, you got a new interest. Maria's interested. Maria's an architect and UI UX designer, so I'm willing to try your product now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, sign up in a beta.
Here, we should.
Yeah, sign up for the waitlist.
Yeah.
Let's repaste the link for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Kind of on the topic of, by the way, I know I have this meeting set as 45 minutes. Do you guys have like some extra time to go over some other questions this minute? Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Just wanted to vibe check there. I call them vibe checks, but yeah, vibe checks. I say that a lot. Kind of on the topic of funding founders, raising money, Silicon Valley. With all the founders in AI right now, like what advice do you have for entrepreneurs looking to raise funding for their AI startup? And how can they effectively communicate the value of their solution to investors? I know you guys mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'm curious, like, you guys have any like thoughts on like pitching to investors in AI in this
absolutely.
time? Yeah.
So I'll give the caveat right now, which is that so far we're purely bootstrapped. We haven't taken any VC money or angel money. We may launch an angel round sometime early next year. But right now we're just focusing on getting customers to sign up for the platform and build a customer-centric product. But that aside, the advice that I would give is there are really two times that make the most sense to raise money as a startup. The first is your pre-product. You haven't built a product. You have an idea and you have an amazing team that you've put together, and you can go to the investors and build out like, here's how we're going to execute on this idea and build this dream, and here's our business model, and here's how we're going to do it, and here's how you can help. And generally, if you're going to an investor, you want to make the case of why that investor is of value. And this is both ends. This is mostly for the founder. That investor should be a value add beyond just a capital infusion. You don't just want $1 million check. That investor should be able to help with whatever domain you're going after, whether it's industry partners or actually getting customers in that space or adoption or market share. It should provide ideally a little bit more value than just money. And so that's the pre-product approach, that capital injection can help you build a product, because sometimes a team, people have an idea and they don't have the engineering background to put it together themselves. And so that's an appropriate approach to take that strategy. The other one is the post-revenue. So you've demonstrated value, and this is the best time to raise money. You've demonstrated value, you have a product that works, you have paying customers who have swiped their credit card, and you have positive growth trajectory, and you really need to inject capital to take it to the next stage. And that's, you can, if you decide to not raise capital until that point, you might enter a valley of death, whereby you die before you get to post revenue. That is a risk, and so that's why you can take a little bit risk off the table by doing the pre-product approach. But if you already invest time to build a product, and you don't have post revenue, you're gonna give up a little bit more equity in order to get that capital infusion, which is fine, because sometimes that might be the only way to get your product off the ground. And that's a completely acceptable way of doing it. But those are really the two best times to raise money. And in either case, I would say having like a P&L or a profit and loss trajectory, where you can sort of map out like, here's the size of the team, like these 5 people, here's how much money they're going to cost, here's how much our customer acquisition cost is, or how much marketing spend we need to take to bring on and onboard someone, how long it takes. If it's a consumer product, what adoption looks like, and how you plan on converting it to revenue. And so that you can understand how many months of this line do I need to survive before it breaks even. And then that's the amount of money you want to raise. There's no reason to go out and raise money that you don't need. You're going to end up giving up equity that you don't need to give up. The best is to actually have that model. And sometimes it's guessing too.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to have a good idea of how much money you spend on marketing or what the cost of getting a customer is until you start doing it. But you can model these things. You can run experiments. You can pay for an ad and see how it converts to like an idea, even if it's just a landing page. And looking at those metrics can give a really strong indicator of interest.
Yeah, and this is where maybe me and Noah would disagree, in the sense that a lot of this can be very complicated, right? And it can almost on an emotional level be a little bit scary to really, put yourself out there, ask for money, ask for networking, ask someone to connect you. And this is where like a Y Combinator or equivalent can come in handy, especially if you're very early career, you're trying to build a network early. The only issue with any of those programs is that they take a large equity cut very early. And once you get on that path, it can be very hard to get off.
Right. But in the case of Y Combinator, I mean, they're a great example of giving you the connections and network that you need if that's something you don't have.
But there's lots of great incubators. I don't want to. It's not just that one. Any incubator is going to take a cut in exchange for some of these kind of services, giving you a community, helping you get that network. And so a lot of what this early investing is, if you are early career or you're struggling to find that good product market fit, is getting hooked into a network that can hopefully help you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I know, I'm curious, like, why did you decide to stay bootstrapped? Because I know a lot of people, especially when I talk to founders, they're all crazy about raising money. I personally am staying bootstrapped for the companies I'm building. I'm curious, like, what made you guys decide to stay bootstrapped right now?
Well, we're both builders, and we looked at the product that we could build. We went, what does the MVP for this look like? And we went, we could probably put that together. And we have, and there wasn't a reason to raise money to build the MVP in our case, because we both have technical backgrounds. If you build the right team, you could also find a way of doing that as well. And now we're just trying to get it to customers where by going in this process, we're going to learn what we need funding for. And when we actually get customers to use the product more and more and focus on retention of those customers, we would understand exactly how many more we need to take on. And that would answer the question of how much money do you need, if you need any at all. And it also de-risks the investment for the investor, where we've done the market research. We talked to all the customers. We built the thing for them. And it's like a no-brainer to like, okay, if you just inject this much capital, you're going to get this much more market share. And there might be a window of opportunity whereby we can do customer organic growth, wherein you don't need to take investment money because the customers are sort of financing the business. That's like the ideal holy grail. But it doesn't always work out that way. Market conditions can change. You could have a bunch of people churn off your product. You could find that you hit a ceiling and you can't get more than a certain number of studios unless you do more marketing or hire a full-time salesperson. And all of those are great reasons to raise money. We just haven't hit that wall yet.
Yeah.
So we've just been bootstrapping so far.
Yeah. And one of the nice things about a software business, I'm assuming very similar for you, is that the cost of goods and services is just relatively low, especially at this early stage where, it's not a lot of fixed costs. It's a lot of, incremental costs as we bring on more customers. So, we just don't have to raise. If for someone in the design industry, if you're a UI designer, it's really great. Again, your cost of goods and services is pretty low. But if you're an actual physical designer, you're trying to come up with an actual physical object MVP, maybe you need access to, or you need to pay for heavy machinery and CNC metal or equivalent. You need to start scaling operations. You need to start talking to a distributor. These probably mean you have to raise a lot earlier than what we need to.
Yeah, like if we had gone and done a business that focused on hardware, we would have had to raise money before building a prototype for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, personally, I like staying bootstrapped because I keep 100% of the equity. So I don't have to give it away. Yeah.
Listen, 100% of something worthless is still zero.
That's
but
true.
if you give away 10% of that, and that's going to inject and move the needle and allow you to move the company forward, then sometimes you have to do what you got to do. But it certainly has to lose that control.
Agreed. Yeah, everyone's in their own situation. I'm still really early on in my career, so in entrepreneurship journey, so still figuring out along the way. But yeah.
And VC isn't the only route too. A lot of us have been sold the idea that VC is really good because you see
Twitter.
Well, yeah,
Twitter.
Because you see people like, look, I raised $6 million to do X, or you raised $2 million to do Y, and you're like, wow, these people are really, that's actually a form of debt that they took on just by giving up equity with no interest, but it's a little different structure. But sometimes that's not the only path. Sometimes you could raise money from angel investors. And sometimes the incentive structure of an angel investor is more aligned with a founder because an angel investor is going to want to see, let's say, a 5-10x return on their investment. But if a VC firm doesn't see a 20 to 100x return on their investment, they're just going to write you off as a loss and stop reinvesting in your product. And so that's a risk that a business can take on. We've seen a lot of companies in the tech space, this has started to happen to, where they raised during a low interest rate environment. Now we have a high interest rate environment that's playing with the whole VC market a bit.
Mm.
But it's still a possible path. It's just not the only one.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about like relationships you build along the way, how you can mutually benefit each other, and how you can
Exactly.
share resources and help each other, and making sure your investors also have your best interest. They want you to grow, because if you grow,
Yeah.
they grow too. So just
Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah.
Positive incentive structures.
Yeah,
It's the
good
best.
vibes all around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also really want to touch on the topic. I know we have a lot of UX designers here, about like design and engineer collaboration. Like briefly, like how has been both of your experiences like working with designers? What does a successful designer engineer collaboration look like?
I think I'm the worst one. I'm worse of us too, because I worked at startups where we either didn't have a designer, and so it was up to just the business to figure it out, which is many hats. And he's worked at Apple, which I don't know if you know this, is
Yeah.
pretty good. It's pretty good at design.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
They're okay.
I'm born and raised near Apple headquarters, so I was born in Apple. No, I was not born in Apple, but I was born basically where Apple is.
Yeah, working with designers there was very interesting. I loved the time there. It's like one of the things I miss was the people that I got to work with there. Where some of what was lovely about working on the privacy team was, someone would pitch an idea for an app, and he'd be in the room and people would be like, should we do that? Like from a privacy perspective, like there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can build. But what I loved was that was like the first question that people would ask when they pitched an idea of like, should they even do it? Like, and then sometimes people would go, well, like we could try. Like there must be like a privacy friendly way of doing this. And that's like where innovation comes from. It's like not letting that necessarily shut down an idea, but allowing it to be an opportunity to invite innovation of like, okay, how can we design around a problem where privacy is respected, and we can still do this really cool feature. I'm trying to think of like an example that I can talk about because a lot of it isn't on the market yet. So I'm trying to think of something that was done in the past. Find My is a really good example of transparency to users, like the way that had to be designed so that it's exactly what you're sharing. And I think there's a new feature that was launched where you can share like check-in. You can check in with people over iMessage. The way that had to be thoughtfully designed, and where it's like, how much data am I sharing with this person when I create a check-in? And if you don't know what check-in is, it's like a new feature on iOS that came out on iOS 17. And it allows you to share like either minimal tracking information or like all of the information of your device, including like battery health, whether it died, where it was located when it died, while you're along a route with a friend. Like let's say you're trying to meet up with a friend. But you don't necessarily have to share your location indefinitely with that person over Find My. You can just create a check-in now. And that's like a nuance that we created because of like weird social situations that emerge if you just give someone access to your Find My location all the time. Like there are weird expectations around it. And it's like, how can you design around that? And so it's like both privacy and design were like at the table at the same time throughout all of that. And that was a really cool problem set of like not letting engineering be a blocker, but like rather opening up like an invitation of like, how can we do this in a way where we solve the cool problem rather than just shutting it down because it's not possible.
On the startup side, which is very dramatically different, it's usually the business brings in a designer, usually in terms of creating marketing material for for a 3 to 6 month engagement. They'll usually create a set of marketing materials, sometimes UI design, sometimes not. And then that kind of becomes the vibe of what things should look like and follow. Sometimes that results in engineers creating, I really like Storybook, for example. So I create a lot of React and Svelte, HTML elements that were fit into I don't want to even call it a design management system. I don't even want to call it that. It's more of there was a vibe put out by the marketing side about what the product should look like. and then the engineers kind of interpret that as what that should roughly look like in terms of color palette, in terms of, you know, sharpness of corners and things of that nature, and how the UI should be laid out intuitively. And so it's a lot more of interpretation of from the engineer's side of what a designer had in mind, usually coming from like from a much more
sounds like they needed a designer.
You know, listen, you're a startup and your money is, you have to manage your book very well, and every one designer you bring on, not that it can make or break it, but it's certainly another cost on your balance sheet. A lot of firms decide to not move forward with more formal UI design and try to win on the boringness of their business, or even trying to get people off UIs and integrated more into existing systems. So that's kind of been my experience. I'm sorry to the UI designers here. I root for you. I wish you existed in more startups and places, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get through it.
I'd wager the startups that don't make that investment, though, are probably going to get bit at some point by not designing it properly.
I mean, once you hit a certain point, you can start. I'm thinking like once you hit like a Series B, Series C, it becomes a lot more sense to every product goes through a proper design review and comes from a UI design and working with engineers. But for early stage, it can be a lot harder to incorporate proper UI design philosophy.
In our case, we're different because our customers are designers, so the bar is a little higher.
Yeah, it sucks.
That's for sure.
It always depends, and a lot of designers here, y'all should become founders as well. So now you don't have to hire more designers because you're a designer yourself. And also with Design Buddies, we have a lot of resources for anyone without a design background to learn design and upskill. So you can always upskill yourself or use your strengths and
one of the biggest advantages I've seen out of design founders is they have the most incredible vision of what the product should look like out of anyone I have ever met. Engineers generally have a good sense of how to solve the problem. Business people generally have the network to solve it, but design people generally are the ones who have the vision of what it should look like in there, and are able to express that in a way that is incredibly valuable. So I do think there is a real skill set and a real reason to have, and especially in this market where a lot of marketing design is becoming a much bigger deal for firms trying to differentiate. It makes, and you've seen even in firms like Fortune 500 firms start to, not Fortune 500, maybe 14,000, but more firms start to, you know, bring up their marketing and design people through the ranks and to have more of a say in corporate decisions. So I certainly think there is a place for this kind of mindset, especially a design focused founder.
Yeah, I can see that. Two questions left. One really quick by Ashley, and says, what do you mean by Series A, B, C startup, for those who don't know?
That's generally a denominator for the round of money that you're raising. So generally you raise enough money to last you for a certain period of time. And then when that money runs out or you've hit certain milestones and goals, you then raise another amount of money, usually a larger amount, to increase the valuation of the business. So how much the business is totally worth, as well as hopefully scale the business to that next step. It's sort of, you're going up the ladder, starting from pre-seed to seed to Series A, Series B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K.
Yeah, I think SpaceX is past the Series N now.
Yeah, it's
some of them get up there.
Some of them don't stop. Some of them don't stop, and they probably should.
Series Z.
If you can raise that kind of money and in the market, I mean, why not? But for most firms, they end up going to around, I'd say like a C at most, and then they go public. Going public is generally the end of, for venture-backed businesses. Not all businesses are venture-backed, but businesses come from different forms, et cetera. But for venture-backed businesses, that's generally the progression. Or a sale. They sell the business.
They get acquired. Yeah.
Loom is a good example of that recently.
Oh, what was that?
Loom is a good example of a business that
Loom.
And they raised a seed round, a Series A, Series B, and then I think they sold.
And Figma too got acquired by Adobe, except there's some non-competes going on right now. Anyways, I don't have any stakes in that, but just what I've seen allegedly. I'm going to kind of combine the two. Rio asked any thoughts, if any, on today's updates on OpenAI Dev Day, and kind of second part is like, what are the future trends and emerging opportunities in the AI industry? This is our last question. We want our buddies to connect. So if you just joined, feel free to drop your socials, and for our speakers, drop your socials too. But I want to stay connected. But yes, future trends, and maybe any thoughts on OpenAI Dev Day.
Yeah, the idea of having, like chat GPT agents that can go off and build things in more complex ways, kind of, I think I touched upon this a little earlier, which is it's going to create a lot of new interesting design problems that we hadn't had before, where like we have to start asking questions of like, what does it look like to be a UI UX designer in 2024, where now these tools exist that can build things in different ways, and what problems are that, or is that going to create for people? In what ways is it going to work really well? And what gaps are going to emerge as a result of it? I think that was one of the first thoughts I had. I think it's going to be really cool. It's hard to know what it's going to be in practice until I can get my hands on something and see what I can do with it. But it's really promising, the types of AI tools that are coming onto the market. And a lot of it, we have to make the assumption that a particular AI model is going to be completely commoditized, which is why it's all about you either go the platform approach or solving a vertical. And that's really where the best value add can be, I think.
Yeah, and on the OpenAI dev topic, which I think really goes to what one of our core thesis is, as well as what I think the market will look like, is that you're going to see a lot more closed data systems, right? OpenAI is talking about building out custom GPT agents, which you can already kind of do. It's not as exciting as I think they hyped it up to be. The real value add, which is something we're actively working on, is having a rich set of data to pull from. Right. The agent can be as cool or awesome as it wants to be, but if it doesn't have the data access to, for at least for us, pull up those interesting design materials or, whatever vertical you're working on, it doesn't really matter. So I think you're going to start to see a lot of more walled gardens, and the walls are going to go a lot higher, especially on the digital side. So they'll probably start increasing the cost of their APIs, or they're going to start charging individuals for the actual platform. We've already seen that with Twitter, with certain firms, Instagram following up as well. So I think OpenAI is really trying to be the consumer end of these GPT models. I don't know how that will work for them. I doubt that it will work for them because of this kind of closed data access issue. They may try to switch to pivot to B2B, where they're generating it off people's own, but with a lot of the emergence of models becoming very public and the competition in the space. We've looked at Google's Palm as well, has been a really great one. It's hard to see where they're going to go with it, but we don't think it really affects our business. I think for a lot of builders in the space, they're not too overly worried about it. And so I think the future still is going to be very interesting, where a lot of the design is going to open up and a lot of the actual data access is going to close down.
And it's sort of tangentially related to the privacy problems that exist in this space. Absolutely, too. Yeah. If you're a design agency like IDEO, you have so many proprietary assets that you can't upload to certain machine learning models. You just can't. You can't even engage with them. But we're going to start to see some custom hosted solutions that really open up what's possible for a lot of industry partners, which is sort of the approach that we're trying to take here as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely agree. I've been seeing companies building their own internal chat GPTs ones as well. So yeah, thanks so much. This was so fun. Really enjoyed it. Any last thoughts you guys want to share and didn't get to share yet?
Thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you so much for being an amazing host. And thank you so much to the entire Design Buddies community for coming out and just supporting us and being present. We love talking about this stuff. We're very open about talking about this stuff. If anyone here wants to reach out to either of us, please do. We'd love to work with you, talk with you, anything we can do to help and support you guys. And if you want to sign up for our waitlist, imageworks.ai is the place to be. We're really excited. We are working in kind of a beta testing mode right now for a particular set of users to help try the product. So always happy to have more ears to listen to.
Couldn't say it better myself. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. This was fun. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know in the past we've done a lot of like design focused talks, but I'm very curious about all the startup stuff, all the building stuff, all the entrepreneurship stuff as well. So really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And feel free to like drop your links if you want people to connect. I dropped ImageWorks, so sign up for the beta. And for buddies, just feel free to plug away and feel free to like share our LinkedIns and send each other a personalized invite saying that y'all met at this event to make that connection, get that bread, get that network.
And that's the something we talked about here. It's that networks matter. Absolutely, they matter.
Yeah, relationships matter, like quality over quantity as well, but it also helps to have more people, at least for me. Like I found a lot of value in connecting on LinkedIn and like posting on LinkedIn. That's how I got a lot of like opportunities and stuff too. So yes, add everyone, go connect, come
Yeah.
friends, all buddies here together, builder buddies, AI buddies. Cool. I'm gonna stop live streaming to YouTube.